Um, did you get my message about having to leave at 2 for data leadership team? Thank you.
Yep, all good. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So I want to get us started. This is our quarterly VCAP data and evaluation meeting. I'm really appreciative of everyone taking the time today. As I just mentioned, we have a really packed agenda. We're going to start with early childhood data updates to give a chance for folks to kind of make a few connections. We're going to also do a brief point in time count. We're actually going to give you 2 minutes on the call to do the point in time count for the BBF network, and Dora will talk about that in just a minute. And the majority of today's meeting is really a workshop to build this collaborative data development agenda. And I'll talk about that in just a little while. But to start today's meeting, especially because we have some new folks, what I want to do is a very quick round of introductions. Today, just name an organization, okay? And I will try to move us through. So I am Morgan Craftsman. I'm the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures and Vermont's Early Childhood Data and Policy Center. And let's go to Dave Kelly. Apologize, I can't hear the teams.
Dave Kelly, AOE, or Agency of Education, sorry.
Thanks, Dave. Dora.
Dora Levinson. I am the Research and Data Director at Building Bright Futures on Vermont's Early Childhood Data and Policy Center.
Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole D'Agostino. I'm Building Bright Futures new Data and Policy Manager.
Christine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Glees. I'm with VCHIP, not Child Health and Building Program.
Katie Selena.
Hi, all. Katie Selena, Policy and Research Analyst for Let's Grow Kids.
Heather.
Hi, everyone. Heather Martin. I'm the Director of the Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program for Vermont AEYC.
Maria.
Maria White, Children Integrated Services.
Jen.
Jen Horwitz, Policy and Research Director for Let's Grow Kids.
Emily.
Hi, everyone. Emily Smith, Vermont Department of Health, specifically Division of Maternal and Child Health.
Brianne.
Hi, Brianne Renadette, Economic Services Division.
Thanks, Brianne. Kaya.
Kaya Ganguly, Director of Trauma Prevention and Resilience Development for the state of Vermont.
Eric.
Eric Post, Senior Process and Performance Analyst for the Child Development Division of DCF.
Aaron.
It's tricky when you said Eric. I was about to unmute. Anyway, so I'm Erin Roach. I'm the Director of Impact and Operations at Let's Grow Kids.
Thank you. Katie McCarthy.
Katie McCarthy, Vermont Agency of Education, Early Childhood Special Education.
Carly.
Hey there, sorry for joining a little late, but Carly Tebow, I'm the Supervisor of the Quality Assurance Unit in Family Services.
Renee.
Hi, everyone. Renee Kelly, Director of the Vermont Head Start Collaboration Office. Full disclosure, I have a little one home with me sick from school, so I'll be participating as possible.
Thanks, Renee. Keely.
Hi, everybody. Keely Agan, Early Childhood Nutrition Manager at Hunger Free Vermont, and I'm so happy to see all of you here today.
Great to have you. Hi, Claire. We're just doing name, organization, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Sorry to be late. Claire Waterman. I am the Senior Director of Research for Child Care Aware of America. Great to be here.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. So I am going to have Dora put a link to the point in time count into the chat right now. I want everybody to actually take 2 minutes and fill out the point in time count for the BBF network. So we have the closest we can have to an accurate point in time count while my grant manager, Renee, is on the phone for Building Bright Futures. So we consider all of you part of the BBF network, and we're really trying to capture accurate representation of who is around our table so that we can figure out who is missing from our table and make sure that we are accurately recruiting. So please take 2 minutes to do that.
It's telling me I already did it. Is this the one that came out via email previously? Perfect. Okay.
Yes. Yep. If you have already done it, kudos. I don't have gold stars to hand out, but thank you. Okay. I'm going to move us on. Thank you for doing that. Please finish it and click the submit button. Today's agenda, for those who came on late, we're going to start with early childhood data updates, and then we're doing a workshop on Vermont's early childhood data and development agenda, specifically focused on universal pre-K, mental health, and workforce. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But I want to start by saying our team at BBF took some time after our last meeting to think about building an early childhood data collection repository. So for those of you who were here in our last meeting, we asked you all whether or not you felt we need in the state of Vermont to capture what is being done and what is being collected in a different way. And so I'm going to share my screen with you to show you what we've built. We will also send you a PDF of this document. But what we've done is created a Google form to start to collect information on what data collection efforts are happening across the system. We also want your feedback on what you feel like it needs to capture. So what are the questions we need to ask folks? And do you feel like this is the right intent? So we're going to send you this PDF and would like your feedback soon after the new year. But ultimately, what we tried to say is we need the ability to know who, what, and when there is data that is being collected on behalf of kids, families, and the early childhood system, and that we're going to use this tool to compile a repository of how people are collecting data, what tools they're using, what questions they are using, and then have a space where folks can actually make those connections across data storage so that we are reducing duplication and aligning efforts. So we will also have a live space online where we will allow folks to see what is currently happening, what's underway, and what's coming. There's an ability to upload. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Let me just interrupt to say that that's actually why we're using a Google form, is so that it actually is automatically doing that, which means that we won't be holding up the process at BBF. And for those of you who can't use your work for I hope that you're able to use a personal email to be able to complete that. And if that is an issue, let us know and we will work around, figure out a work.
Yes, great point, Dora. So one of the things that we have tried to pivot towards at BBF is that we are often holding so many documents and need to update them and reproduce them and put them out there. And so we're trying to streamline that process on the back end to figure out how do we have more iterative documents that are live more continuously. So I'm not going to go through this entire data collection tool, but it does outline what types of data we're looking for or collection things that we are looking for. And what we want your feedback on is 1, the intent, 2, the process by which we kind of will develop this and keep it as this iterative live document. And 3, what are all of the different questions and things that we need to be asking someone to fill out in order to have a really strong sense of the data that they're collecting, the type of data, and the timing. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Dave Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that maybe that there was actually a step between number 3 and 4 here, that what we might be looking to do is develop a global MOU for all the agencies that might have access to this repository, so that each of the data stewards would have sort of an interagency agreement in place to have access to that data, right? That way, I think that would make the job of doing this a lot easier too, because it becomes transparent to then all the agencies involved. Now, looking around the room, there's a lot of agencies. It could take a serious bit of time to develop those MOUs.
Yes. Okay. So Dave's beating us to the punch in some ways around PDG, Dora and Emily and others that were actively writing PDG, right? That is the gold vision for how we think about doing this work, right? That's what we want to be moving towards. And in the absence of having these beautiful MOUs, how do we think about capturing and monitoring? Because the other piece is it's not just state government that's putting out surveys and collecting and monitoring data. And there will not be able to necessarily be that beautiful ability to share across other entities. So I agree with you. Go ahead, Dora.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that this is not actually about sharing data. Like, we would love to get to that place. And I think that this will allow people to say like, okay, you're collecting this, like, can we actually share the data and create an MOU that way? This is literally like, hey, we put out a survey on early childhood needs of families, families with young children. And then like 2 days later, the CIS team put out their survey. And so it is about aligning. It's about saying like, is there a question that we can add and sort of reduce that survey fatigue? Trying to, but this is like way lower level. This is like a stopgap measure, because right now we're just not providing any collaboration, or there's not as much collaboration and alignment as, and hopefully this will help with that.
Right. And hopefully, because it will be a living document online, you can actively be looking at it and then reaching out to the different data contacts. Go ahead, Claire.
And I may have mentioned this in a previous call, but this reminds me of a lot of the work that we've done. When I was at EDC, we had done through the REL Northeastern Islands. We did several data catalogs across different states, and we did actually do one last fall in Vermont as it related to a data catalog around teacher data. But there are some processes and like questions. So you think you had mentioned, looking through and making sure, like, are these the things we need to know about the data? So you might be able to connect with folks who are still, I know Catherine Shields and Evangeline are leading the work with Vermont AOE through the REL, but I'm sure that they would be happy to connect with you and talk about and share any resources that they can share if it would be valuable to you. Because this to me just seems like a data not just, it's a big undertaking, but it seems like a data catalog that really just basically says, here are all the data that are being collected, who owns that data, when is it happening, those types of things. And so if that's helpful, I could be happy to connect you with folks.
Yeah, that would be awesome, Claire. And that is very tied to the data development agenda discussion we'll have in a little bit. Emily.
Hi, so I just want to speak to David's comment earlier and what Dora said about that being the larger vision. Like, this is the gold standard that we eventually would love to be at. And I think if we add another layer to this process in that we track who is most often requesting data from who, we can start to build almost a network analysis saying, these people might benefit from having an MOU, which might be easier to undertake than that overarching massive one. But at least we are keeping track of that and essentially building evidence to the point that we need an MOU that traverses like all of these different areas, divisions, departments, organizations, everything. So that might be worth us looking into, figuring out a good system for tracking who is needing what data from who.
Great feedback, Emily. I love that idea. And I think that's completely possible. All right. More to come here. We will send you the PDF. Again, I think that this is the baby step. This is the first pass, and that's what we're looking for your feedback on right now. What's missing? How should we think about utilizing this document? How will you all utilize this document? How do we disseminate it? It's that piece before we actually put it out publicly and start using it. So thank you. So I want to turn it over to all of you quickly to say, in the next 30 minutes, we want to hear your data updates. What's happening in your data space? What's coming? What are you excited about? What are the types of things that you need this group to either know or that you might need from this group? And we can definitely do this popcorn style as you're all thinking about what might be coming. It could be what data you need for the legislative session. What data are you tracking or monitoring? Is there some amazing report that you think might be dropping in the next month that you want access to? What are those data needs or updates?
I'm happy to start the discussion. So here from Family Services again, and I'll share that we have a very old data collection system that's really difficult to work with and really prevents us from extracting data in a meaningful way. It does mean great job security for my team because we do a lot of manual work. But we did just get official sign off from the CFO of the Agency of Human Services to move forward with bringing a new data collection system to FSD. So it's a multi-million-dollar, multi-year project that's going to, we don't have enough money yet, but we have a decent amount to start it. And that's really exciting because we've had several iterations of trying to get this work off the ground. And it feels like, after several years, we're finally getting a little bit of traction. It'll be a huge undertaking. Like I said, it's going to, probably be 7 to 10 years before we have a viable product, just with how capacity is for everybody. But it feels good. It feels exciting. So.
That is amazing news, Carly. Thrilled and let us know what support you may need. I'm thinking specifically around, I'm looking to the agency leaders in the room who have been involved with the preschool development grant and thinking about being able to link or integrate early childhood data as they are building a new system. What are the things they should think about including to make sure that it has the certain capabilities? But that's incredible news.
Yeah, that would be great because long term, we're looking to have provider portals where people can be, sharing their own data there. That's a kind of a further phase of the project, but anything that we can do to set the system up ahead of time is, we're really interested in doing. So
huge win for FSD. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so my advice would be when you're setting up your system, you're going to identify your new primary keys for your tables. So at the master level for a person or a client or student or whatever, you're going to want to leave field space for foreign keys for like an AOE ID or a CDD ID, whatever different IDs you might need to connect the data with. And that's going to make those data requests like almost it's the first step to getting them automated, to tell you the truth. So the other thing I would suggest is if you're going to ask a vendor to develop a proprietary product, I like to look for vendors that are using open source tools that will guarantee me to be able to own the code afterwards. So just
thank you. Yeah, anything is helpful.
So Dave, I wonder if we have not a reconvening of SLDS, but as we think about Data Governance Council, as we're thinking about moving towards the preschool development grant work, we need agency leaders on the data steward side to get together and say, here are all the lessons learned. Please don't touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. Do this, not this, right? That's the conversation I think that needs to definitely happen. And once you're ready, Carly.
So yeah, please include me in anything that's connected to that.
Amazing.
Thanks.
I agree. You might want to rebrand it, Morgan, because there could be people with, SLDS bad taste.
All the things. Yes.
Yeah, right.
We'll come up with a new name. All right, yeah. Emily.
Hi, I have a request. I am working towards embarking on a deeper dive into some needs assessment work using some of our Title V funding that is coming down the pipeline. And we want to really specifically hone in on our minority populations in Vermont, specifically our immigrant and new American communities, African American communities, and a particular high hopes interest in connecting with our Indigenous folk. And so if anyone has any needs assessment work that they've already done that focuses in on these populations, if you have the ability to send it my way, tips and tricks, contacts for getting relationships built with these communities, I would greatly appreciate it. I know this is going to be a tall order, and this is something that is mentioned kind of across the board in priority areas and strategic planning, but we might be lucky if we get like one focus group here or, a discussion session here or there. And I really want to just bring the collective data together as best as possible without overburdening these communities and doing it in a performative way. So if anyone has any material, any contacts, anything that you think might be beneficial as I embark on this work, I would greatly appreciate it. I'll throw my email in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. Great. Those are the exact types of requests we think are important for this group. Definitely, if folks want to follow up right now, very quickly, go for it. And we will disseminate a full list of everybody in this committee to the rest of the committee and make that available too. Go ahead, Kaya.
So Emily, if you're not connected with USCRI or AALV, I can do an introduction handoff. The other thing, just so you're aware, the terms minority and New American are not really in favor anymore, especially minority. The New American one's a little controversial because some people find it condescending. They're like, we're American. So, and conflating refugee, immigrant, asylum seeker is also challenging because they have very, very different experiences. So
great, thank you. These are all things that I need to soak in because we have the standards are just all over the place at this point. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say talk with your equity liaison from your OHEI team. I know there is one for maternal child, and I'm trying to remember her name, but it escapes me. I've met them all, and they're pretty amazing.
Yes, they are, and this is the space that we are trying to navigate right now. There's a lot of ongoing discussion about how people identify, what terms are appropriate to use. So we're hopefully making some progress, but very slow.
So glad to hear that there's progress on making those connections. And actually, Jay from the Office of Racial Equity is usually with us. They are not here today, but that's another connection, Emily, if you haven't made yet, to connect with Susanna, Jay, or Shalini over there. Claire.
Be brief, but so just a heads up. So we at CCAOA, we have an annual survey that we put out where we gather information on the landscape of childcare in addition to price of childcare across states. We connected with Eric and his team. So I think we're on a good trajectory for making sure we get data from Vermont for this upcoming session. But I did want to mention we are actually doing some cognitive interviews with several states in January, just to make sure that the language we're using in those surveys is appropriate. One of which I think I had flagged last time, where we looked at licensed family providers, but of course in Vermont, that means a very particular thing. So I think there's an under-reporting of the availability of family childcare within Vermont within our reports. So I will flag that for all of you if you do use our reports. And then just finally, our final larger report will be coming out in January. We have a tentative release date for the 25th. And we'll have an associated webinar with that. So we're pretty excited. We're doing some additional breakdowns, looking across race, ethnicity, and other by counties. We got some data from the Women's Bureau that we're incorporating, as well as from the Rapid survey that you may be familiar with, that we're incorporating into that final report. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Claire. Heather?
Hi, yeah. I had to step away for a minute, my apologies, but it sounds like we're just sharing things about data. And I just wanted to put out there that at Vermont AUIC, we have really been spending this year getting our programs, starting to onboard our programs into a database and developing a CRM. And we are using program that integrates really well with other API systems. So this is just really exciting to hear about, and we have able to, we're already able to partner with Northern Lights, like for the student loan repayment program, and they're able to review things and only see the data that they need. So this is just very exciting that this is happening. And yeah, we would love to be a partner to make sure our system works well with what the state comes up with. So thank you.
That's awesome. Great news, Heather. I love hearing when people are using APIs in the background. It makes me think of Dave Kelly's team and how we've built Vermont's Early Childhood Data and Policy Center and other things. So go ahead.
Thank you. The other thing, I'm sorry, I just wanted to put out there the particular system that we're using has a really robust training program. And so our staff at Vermont AUIC, we're actually just about wrapping up like a 2-month training process that's very affordable. And so we are actually now able to launch and develop and edit and do whatever we need to on the admin end to manage our own programs and not have to go to the database company and like wait in line for a developer. So it's been a very efficient model for us. Took a while to get in line for the training initially, but now that that's done, we're expecting it'll help us get things up and running faster. So I would just look for that too, to make sure that your staff can manage things.
Great feedback. Thank you. Dave.
Yeah, as you and Dora and others at BBF know, I have a ton of data due to you. So my data need is to kind of get some of that work done. It spans enrollment, exclusionary discipline data, some of the breakdowns by FRL and IEP status for the state. So one of the challenges for us at this time is, as I spoke to Morgan about this yesterday, staffing. And, you know, we're requesting more analyst power through the PDG grant. We've also had some staff turnover late that has put us a little bit behind, but we still feel like we're going to meet most of the targets. The one that I identified yesterday when I was talking to Morgan, though, that really we could use some help with improvement on is the TS Gold, which is our pre-K assessment that we do twice a year. The vendor format is very challenging and requires a lot of data 2 steps. And talk about something that's not ready for API technology. It's really, you're extracting from a very sort of antiquated type of database that doesn't have a lot of flexibility and doesn't have a lot of ability to relate to other sort of like data lake type tools. So, you know, that's sort of where I would identify those 2 things as a data need. Since Heather went right before me, and I'm also a data steward for things like dual enrollment and early college and post-secondary outcomes, I would be super interested in showing that dual enrollment in early college means that students end up paying less for college or borrowing less, at least for college. That seems to be a really powerful outcome that, of course, speaks to, you know, parents and just about everybody that has skin in the game. So I guess that's my 2 cents, or part of it. I'll probably steal the mic again sometime.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. And I think that is also what we want this group to be able to utilize the connections and to know, here are some of the data that we are prioritizing. How are you making a connection to see what's possible, what data can be linked? How are we thinking about that data? And as I'm thinking about enrollment or needing improvement in some of our data sources, that is also a very concrete next step for us with this idea of a data development agenda. So in the next section of this, that is where you will have time to say, all right, I want to get together with a group of people who want to talk about education data or pre-K data. I want to get together with the group that wants to talk about mental health or workforce, and then have that very concrete discussion about what are the gaps, what are the opportunities, what are the limitations. Jen.
Just wanted to flag really quickly a few things. I'm going to pass it off to Katie in just a minute to do most of the update, but A, we're really excited about the RAND report and when that's going to come out, and that's data related and looking forward to that. B,
can you say what that is for folks, Jen, that are not tracking? Not everybody will know what the RAND report is.
Thank you. You don't all live inside acronym land in my head. The RAND report was ordered by the legislature. It was contracted out through JFO to Rand Corporation, multinational research firm, to investigate the cost of a future early care and education system, all of the components of that. What is the true cost of care? What would the big number to kind of make quality, affordable, accessible childcare available to Vermont families? So there's the big number part, and then there's also proposals on how to actually pay for that. What are different sustainable long-term financing mechanisms that could be used by the state of Vermont to finance that system? So all of that coming together, report is due on January 15th to the legislature. So really looking forward to the outcomes of that, something following closely. Lots of great data has been going into that. They've been meeting with various partners and advisory committee through BBF. And so just really looking forward to the culmination of all of that work. The other thing that I wanted to flag is usually in years when Let's Grow Kids releases the Stalled at the Start report, we also release a companion report called Access, which is an investigation of the number of lead early childhood educators that the state needs in order to meet demand. This is my FYI, that's not happening this year. It will come out in 2023 if Katie and I can clear a little bit more space on our calendars. We're waiting on some ECU workforce data from the Child Development Division. They put out their report, which is great. We use that as a source data set combined with our Stall at the Start analysis to produce Access. So this is just me being like, hey, we did not get to that this year. It's going to come out next year. Once we have a better timeline idea, we'll let you all know. And then finally, we've been working on 2 amazing surveys with a bunch of partners and families on childcare needs assessments, a families of color childcare needs assessment, and a needs assessment of childcare for children with specialized needs. And I'll pass it to Katie real quick to do just a update on where we're at and when we will have the reports on those available.
Thanks, Jen. Yes. So for the survey for families with children with specialized needs, we're in the midst of putting the materials together. We've done our analysis and we're getting ready to prep some resources to share those key findings out and to use during the legislative session. So that's very exciting. And with our Families of Color Needs Assessment, the links are still live. We recently, in the last month, released a Spanish translation version of that survey. So we're hoping to still collect some more info there, but we are going to do, I believe, an analysis of the findings we have so far so that we can use that information to better inform the work that we're doing this legislative session.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Eric.
Okay. Well, CDD is still working on our new data system for the financial assistance program, CDDIS, and that's getting better every day. Some days it gets a little bit worse, but we're fixing things as we go. And really, I'm coming to appreciate how much more responsive we can be with data requests with this, because we don't have to go to IT and ask them to program something into a decades-old system. We can choose the variables a lot more easily and just run things on the fly, which doesn't mean that people can come to us on a Thursday and ask for information for Friday, but we should be a lot more responsive going forward, I think. Right now, we're doing a lot of just year-end data reports. We have reports due to the federal government, in particular, the Quality Progress Report, which spans not only the financial assistance program, but also, STARS, our quality program, and, licensing, things of that nature. We've been doing some support work for that RAND report as well, feeding them information for they asked for the last 5 years worth of information on our financial assistance clientele, try and get some idea of that. And the other thing that came out of that bill in the legislature that's producing the RAND report that we need to work on at some point in the coming year, I think it got pushed to the end of March. The legislature has also asked us to take a look at shifting from attendance-based to enrollment-based payments. And what would that cost our system, if we paid for the space rather than the service, essentially, something along those lines. And the last thing I would add is that the feds, for one of our monthly reports for them, the ACF 801 reports, are in the process of launching a new web-based system, which will give us access to a lot of information on this demographics and such, especially race and ethnicity, on the people who are using the financial assistance program. It's information we're collecting anyway, but this will just make it a lot easier to visualize. So they are shifting to that, I believe, at the beginning of 2023.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And for those of you who are not tracking some of the other things that are coming into this session, I think that, you know, Eric's team and CDD are going to be, they're actively fielding data requests, and that conversation about attendance versus enrollment will definitely be in play during the session. So even though the report is not due until the end of March, I believe, that will be an active discussion, and hopefully Rand is addressing some of that as well. Thank you. Kaya.
So I'm going to say right up front, I'm just here to be a pain in the butt to everybody. So I'm going to preface that.
Bring it on.
Just translation does not mean access, because we cannot assume literacy, no matter what the language is. When you think that 21% of the adults in the United States, that's like 1 in 6, are illiterate. So even in English, you may not be hitting some of the population that you need because they're not reading. I mean, 54% of adults have literacy before 6th grade level, below 6th grade level. So it's an issue that we don't talk a lot about, but it's definitely an access issue and data issue.
Thank you, Kaya. All right, other questions, comments, data updates, data questions for each other? I'm loving seeing all the connections that are able to be made through this meeting, both verbally, but also in the chat, and the opportunity to share resources and information and what that needs to look like. So thank you all. Dora, do you want to give quick BBF updates on things that are coming?
Sure. So I have had my head down and have been in touch with many of you about data for the state of Vermont's children. And Nicole, our data and policy manager, has been doing a phenomenal job of really, I think that this year's report, like years before, is going to be great and is getting more and more robust, including some reach up data for the first time. We're excited about having worked with many of you to go back and forth to make sure that the narratives are really accurate. We just were able to connect with some folks over to talk about emergency boarding for children at emergency departments. So I think that, all the caveats, it's a snapshot, it's really, superficial, but I do think that as we're talking about impactful indicators that stakeholders and the governor and legislature should know about, I think that there's some really powerful stuff in there. And excited about being able to have that be really dynamic on Vermont Kids Data, which is Vermont's Early Childhood Data and Policy Center. We are also, go ahead, Morgan.
I was just going to say, before you transition, for those of you who are either new to the early childhood system or new to the data world in early childhood, BBF is required by state statute to submit this annual report called the State of Vermont's Children to the legislature within the first 2 weeks of the session. And we are required to partner with all of you to do that work and really provide that data snapshot. What are the key indicators that people need to be able to inform their decision making? And what's been amazing is that they're actually using it in the session, right? Our legislative leaders are citing it. They are making those connections. They are using that data to hopefully informed decision making in some really cool ways. So just wanting to say thank you to all of you. The timing of this report is not beautiful or fun for any of us related to how, you know, how we get that data and how we are partnering with all of you. So just wanting to say thank you, because it's a problematic and challenging time of year to make those data requests, to have you all have to take the time to do them, and it's legislatively required. Otherwise, we would shift it. So just wanting to name that and say thank you.
Great. And then we have a note to talk about data priorities in CDG, and that's like the whole grant. So I don't know how much we want to get into. And we have 2 minutes. So Morgan, I don't know if you want me to just give like the briefest of overviews.
Sure. So the preschool development grant was submitted on behalf of Vermont. This was the least competitive round I have seen for a federal grant in the history of ever, where 24 out of 24 states were eligible and applied for that funding. We will know in the next week whether or not Vermont receives that funding. All indications are that we are receiving this funding, and it starts January 1st. There's a significant focus on data, on continuous quality improvement, on measuring systems change, on understanding the needs of kids and families, and really thinking from a systems lens, how we're thinking about collecting, analyzing, compiling, and using evidence and data to inform decision-making. And what I'm really excited about is that we were able to write in additional capacity for agencies to have data people to support the work, because one of the biggest issues that we've seen in the past is that our agency leaders are understaffed, especially on the data. It's not just the data infrastructure, it's the staffing and the personnel capacity to be able to do the work. We have incredible people in state government doing the data work, and they need additional support. So that is something that I am really excited about. And then utilizing this committee and a few other constellations of bringing together those data stewards to actually move this work forward. So I think that what I'd like to do is, once we have the funding in hand, signed, to bring this group back together to give you a full overview of what is written into that grant around early childhood data priorities. None of it will be a surprise to you, because it mostly lives in a charge of this committee. It's thinking about evidence and data to inform policy. How are we monitoring and tracking the system? Okay. I want to transition us, unless anyone has any quick questions about that grant. That grant it's a $24 million grant over the course of 3 years that would come to the state to support kids and families, systems work. There's so much money that will go out the door to communities and providers and educators. So really powerful, and really excited about what that will look like, and that the feds are seeing this as a critical priority and something they are continuously looking to build and move forward, which is great. Awesome. All right, I want to transition us into a workshop mode, which is to say we're going to break down into small groups to have some very kind of rich, in-depth discussions about universal pre-K data or education data, mental health data, and workforce data. But before we do that, I want to bring us back to this very large vision for how we're thinking about how we prioritize data in the state of Vermont. So one of the roles of this committee is, again, how are we thinking about identifying what data needs to be in place to inform decision-making? And that we are charged with bringing together stakeholders and data stewards across this different system to say, what data do we have? What are the limitations? What do we need to inform decision-making? And how do we actually move on those priorities? So one of the things that we have written into the preschool development grant, but also in a range of other sectors, is to build a Vermont early childhood data development agenda. And that this document, or this very live, iterative version of how we think about data priorities, would help us figure out how we align resources, identify critical data gaps, be able to connect the different agencies and organizations, whether it's state government or community partners, to be able to say, okay, we know what the data is that we that we currently have. We know where it lives. We know if it's publicly available. We know how to prioritize the data gaps that we have in place, and we can make connections across those different data stores to figure out how we're tackling these kind of broader issues that we have not been able to tackle related to those data gaps. So I'm going to share my screen one more time to show you that we now have the most recent iteration of Vermont's Early Childhood Data Development Agenda. This lives on vermontkidsdata.org. And what you are seeing is a prototype. And it is coming from previous conversations that we've had with this committee that our team has sat and really tried to grapple with around data gaps. It's stemming from the 2020 Early Childhood Needs Assessment that had a 10-page data gaps table in it for all the things we don't know and can't answer related to kids, families, in the early childhood system. And I think what's most important for you to know is that this is something that our team will continue to manage, monitor, update. And what I've done today is put together this table as of this afternoon, where you can click on pre-K, mental health, workforce, and equity, and see what all the different topics and priorities are that this group and others have come together to say, here's the topic or the priority. Here's what we know about a lead entity, if there is one or if there isn't, what the existing data looks like. So what are the different indicators? What are the ways that we're tracking or monitoring this? Has there been progress? An outline of some of the major limitations, gaps, and challenges that we've seen across this different indicator, that specific indicator. Any remaining questions or considerations, again, like what are the things you have all asked about or named as things we need to think about for next steps? And then any data that's needed to inform decision-making. And here's my biggest caution to all of you. This is just what we were able to put in place today. This is not the full, here's everything we know about mental health data, here's everything we know about childcare and pre-K. This is the current today's draft that we're looking to you all to help us build. Because what we've realized at BBF is that we can't by ourselves in a vacuum create this list to have you reflect on. We need all of you to be able to have the hard discussions to say, okay, here are our remaining questions. We have this data and you have this data. How do we put it in the same place? And Claire, I'm looking virtually at you, even though I can't see you on my screen, knowing that some of that work is starting to happen elsewhere and that this may be or may not be the right way to present it. But for today's discussion, we wanted you to see a couple of different templates for how we are thinking about this, and at least being able to name across this top bar what we are looking for you all to help us do in the next 30 minutes through a workshop. Kaya, go ahead.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get to my mute button. Are these ordered in rank order or just put up?
Nope, these are not in rank order. They are just, we have heard folks say, we want to talk about pre-K mental health and workforce equity as well. And those are not built out yet, right? These are not things that are built out. They are not ordered. This is just for this team to say, we're going to
So then can I suggest you alphabetize?
100%. Yes. I think that's the right approach. And you'll see that the discussions that we've had in mental health, workforce, and equity are nowhere near the discussions that we've had in pre-K, right? Which is, again, why these are coming up as priorities. Pre-K has this very long list of topics, outcomes, questions, right? And Dora and/or Nicole, can one of you throw the link to this actual space into the chat so people can access it? This one, again, is way more built out and robust. So the discussion that group will have is what's missing. Whereas the discussion that mental health, workforce, equity, if you want to be in any of those groups, those discussions are going to be, how are we building this? How do we know and identify the data? Who are the data stewards? It's the very initial steps in thinking about that data. And today's discussion actually isn't even including the equity focus. It's mental health and workforce, only because we haven't brought together enough of the right partners to be in that virtual space. Go ahead, Dora.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and maybe this is too much behind the curtain, but this isn't necessarily just conversations that we've had, but you know, we were setting up this universal pre-K section as a prototype. So that's why it's built out more than the others, not necessarily just, we have had so many conversations about workforce that are not reflected here. We've had so many conversations about all sorts of topics. So just want to point that out, that it's not that we are talking about UPK this so much more than we're talking about anything else. And that's the one that we chose whenever it was.
A year and a half ago, right?
When we started, a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
so,
I really appreciate you saying
that. You know, I think that part of why we're doing this is really to be able to say, like, we can't do it all and it's not getting done. And so let's crowdsource it. Let's work together to be able to move this forward, because being able to have this common agenda is really going to be powerful for us to create that alignment and to be able to move forward our priorities and see where those efforts are can come together.
Right. Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Dora, because one of the things that you will all note is even the state of Vermont's children data is not in this current list, right? That it's really just that when we sat down in previous legislative sessions, specifically because of what Build Back Better was proposing around universal pre-kindergarten education, that's why we started to build that one out. So what we're going to ask all of you to do is help us build this out, and then also provide feedback on the best way to build that out. It's yes in these discussions, but is it a Google form? Is it additional smaller discussions? Is it in Excels? What is the best way to have this type of discussion? We've tried to do it 3 to 5 different ways over the last couple of years. And we wanted to just put it in one place for you all to say, okay, we understand the vision. Now let's collectively think about how to build it and what we can use it for. And eventually be able to say, okay, here's what data is state government's role to collect. Here's all of these data gaps and things that aren't falling in that scope. How do we build this interdisciplinary research consortium of public, of private, of academic partners to actually tackle some of these data gaps and build capacity? Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I would like a clarification on what we mean by workforce data. Are we just talking about workforce as it relates to early learning type programs? Because I have workforce data needs and wants around how students do in terms of outcomes, in terms of the other end of their education. We also have a number of areas in the K-12 arena where we're anticipating different workforce shortages in the coming years. You know, particularly in places that might be of actually an equity issue, because it could be in areas like special education or English language learners that we might fall short on having enough staff. Generally, it's just, you know, Vermont is sort of less competitive than neighboring states in terms of pay for positions like that. So we have to sort of attract people by kind of, you know, Vermont's a great place to live kind of thing, or what have you. The other thing that was really interesting in terms of some of the workforce development stuff that came out of data was from Michigan, when they were like tapping into, they had teacher shortages in a number of areas, and they tapped into who has a license but is not working as a teacher. And can we ask them why they're not working as a teacher and see if they want to come back? And we could do similar things in like childcare or other sort of markets. It might be like, maybe we need more SLPs and early learning, that kind of thing.
Yeah, great question, Dave. So I want to leave it to the group that is in that virtual space to have the conversation you need to around what we as an early childhood system. So when I think about early childhood system, we're not just talking about childcare and pre-K, we're talking about this collective system that is supporting children and families. What are we needing to talk about from a data perspective in that area. And for you all to brainstorm and have that conversation about what is falling in that scope of work. Yes, it's childcare. Yes, it's pre-K. Yes, it's CIS. It's mental health. It's all of those different components. It's anyone who in our early childhood system is serving and supporting kids and families. What do we need to know about that workforce data, and what other components of workforce data impact the early childhood system? So it's that conversation. And I also want to note that, thanks, Renee and Dave, I know you got to jump off too. The other piece of information is these are intersectional topics, right? Stuff that's in workforce is going to be in equity. We actually had conversations last year about, do we have an equity bucket, or should equity be in every single one? And how do you do all of those things well, recognizing that workforce is going to be in mental health and pre-K and all of these areas? So I think that's the discussion that this group needs to have. What are the big bucket priority areas? How do you link across those? Because they are intersectional and they impact each other, and there will be duplication, and that's okay. But that today's conversation in terms of the breakouts will be a group talking about education or early universal pre-K, a group that wants to talk about mental health data, and a group that wants to talk about workforce. What other questions do folks have? Thanks, Dave. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Questions about the big picture vision for this and how we're thinking about it before we give you the option of breakout rooms? All right. So Dora's going to offer 3 different breakout rooms, or one group might stay here. We are going to try a few different mechanisms. Thanks, Katie. For collecting and having the conversation. One, we're going to record the breakout rooms so that we can capture data from the discussion, which might be even more important than whatever's written. We're going to take live notes. We can use idea boards, and are looking to you all to say, what's the best way to provide this information and feedback? All right, let's do it.
Okay, so choose your, choose which one you are excited about, and you should be able to just choose, right? Is that popping up for everyone? Okay,
yep.
Great.
And Nicole and Dora, you have the top 3 questions. What data currently exists? What are the gaps? And what are the questions and considerations?
Yep.
Looks like a lot of folks are joining the workforce one, which is also where I was going to join, but I'm happy to hop into a different one. Just know that I might not have the same level of information that I would for others. So
all good. That's totally
jump into the workforce one. And
exactly.
If like the mental health, if we have one that isn't robust,
Exactly.
then we'll
Yeah,
we won't
I was gonna
do
say,
that.
I'm confused. I can't figure out where to jump, so I don't just stay here.
Anywhere you want to be. If you want to join workforce,
I just can't see the option to jump.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. So on the bottom of your screen, if you click breakout rooms, then you will see UPK, mental health, and workforce, and you can click join in any of those. And I would say we close the mental health one since no one's going there. It's really going to be pre-K and workforce. And Dora, if you want to go to workforce with Nicole, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Works for me.
All right.
Okay. Maria, are you able to make a choice? No. Yep. Okay.
Welcome back. I hope that the last 20 minutes was really helpful for you all to be thinking about data in a different way, even if it's not your primary content area, but just to say, okay, let's do a very brief deep dive into a topic area. What do we know? What do we need to know? And how do we use it to inform decision-making? And I wonder if one person from each of the groups wants to share out either something that like really sparked something for them, or any big questions or thoughts you have about how to do this work well. Don't all jump at once. One of the things that I was saying to our small group, right, when we were coming back in is, as we're thinking about building a repository or this like idea of here are the data priorities and here's how we're going to tackle them and here's the data we need, we also need to catalog what data infrastructure is in place to support it. And is that the major barrier? And if it is, like, how do we think about tackling those things too? Because some of the data systems are stronger than others. And we heard, I think, Carly talking about FSD being able to develop something new. And what does that mean? And CDD, Eric's team being in the middle of this development. So, how do we think about these data challenges and data issues, both from a what should we be measuring and what should we be using, but also how are we collecting it? How are we capturing it? What systems need to be in place? Any questions about how this process is working, or any feedback on how this process is working in thinking about documenting all of this data? It's a really massive project that our team is going to, again, take all of the feedback, the notes from today's session, and then build it into this data development agenda. And it will live there for everybody to kind of review consistently and discuss. But any feedback on how to do that better or well in the next couple of sessions where we're workshopping this?
So I guess my one suggestion would be, and it's going to be some legwork, but try to find some people who actually belong to marginalized groups. So it's not for us, but with us. So you get more voices than just me. Yeah.
Was going to suggest too, maybe checking in, or I can check in with our Advancing the Profession project, because they do surveys and it's very heavy into the workforce, obviously. So I guess just to be aware of that, and we'll see if we have any data that could be helpful.
Awesome.
I do think maybe, because I don't think we got really into a lot of the data, like we spent some time talking about the topics and priority areas and what was maybe missing. And but I do wonder if, connecting with folks that might own data related to each of these in between might be a valuable way to help kind of build that out a little bit more, particularly for the ones that don't have a lot of stuff built out.
Yeah. 100%. I agree with you, Claire. And that's something that is why pre-K is the most built out, right? We've spent so much time, and it's also that some of these aren't built out because we haven't had the capacity at BBF to put things in here. So I think that now that once we get past the State of Vermont's Children on the 9th, which you should all be attending, once we get through that, we can really reset and focus on helping build this out and having some additional workshop sessions and doing that behind the scenes legwork. So, all right, I recognize that we are at time for today. We won't come all together until March 16th at 1 o'clock, but just want to make sure that everybody is scheduled and signed up to be at the State of Vermont's Children on the 9th of January. And we just want to say again, thank you for your partnership on this. This is a very robust body of work, and this committee is so powerful and so strong. And thank you. Happy holidays. Good to see you all.